Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. This is Marwan Rasmi, and it's my pleasure to be the moderator of the panel discussion for this afternoon. First of all, on the behalf of the Cairo Climate Talks family, I would like to welcome you all to the 73rd edition of the Cairo Climate Talks. We would like first to note that simultaneous translation is available for this event in Arabic and in English. And for that, we would like to extend our gratitude to the amazing interpreters working behind the scenes. So first of all, to understand how interpretation works, for English, you'll find this little globe below in Zoom that's called interpretation. Please choose the English channel for English. And for Arabic, you'll have to choose the German channel because Zoom doesn't have an Arabic channel. You will find these options on the bottom hand corner, as I just said. And I'll have to say this one more time in Arabic for whoever needs to. So يا جماعة البرنامج النهارده هيبقى شغال بالانجلش والعربي، وهتلاقوا تحت على اليمين زي علامة الكوكب هندوس بس عليها، ولو عايزين نختار العربي هنختار الجيرمان شانل وهنسمع فيها إن شاء الله الترجمة بشكل فوري. So going back to the English, for this afternoon's event, we'll be lucky to get a closer look into the thoughts of our esteemed panelists on the potential of biogas production and how it can be a driving force for rural sustainable development in Egypt specifically and in developing countries in general. However, before doing so, we are honored to introduce our keynote speakers. Firstly, Mr. Philippe Maupé, and I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, but Mr. Philippe Maupé is the head of the science department in the Embassy of the Federal Republic of Germany in Cairo. And I'd like to leave the floor for him to give us his first keynote speech.
Thank you very much, Marwan. Dear Cairo Climate Talkers, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the 73rd edition of the Cairo Climate Talks and to the first online event of this year. And I'm very excited to start this new season of the Cairo Climate Talks, as we will be celebrating CCT's 10-year anniversary later this year, and we have a very interesting program ahead of us. Our ambassador, Dr. Noon, started the season earlier this year by awarding our 2020 Journalism Award to 6 outstanding Egyptian environmental journalists. And we will be awarding another prize for 2021 at the end of the year, so I encourage all the journalists in the audience to continue to report about climate change and protecting the environment in the Egyptian media. Indeed, 2021 is a very important year for us. As COP26 in Glasgow had to be postponed in 2020, it is now scheduled to take place in November of this year. And on the way to this key event, we will witness intensified engagement towards more ambitious climate goals all around the world, and of course also in Germany and Egypt. And actually next on the agenda of the climate negotiations is the Petersberg Climate Dialogue, which usually takes place on the Petersberg near Bonn in Germany, but which will this year take place online from 6 to 7 May, and which is being organized by Germany in close cooperation with the UK COP presidency. If you look at the CCT agenda for this year, you can expect a wide range of topics, including sustainable makers and local crafts, biodiversity, e-mobility, and the question of climate change and heat. And for those of you who are particularly interested in energy questions, we will have a CCT on diversifying energy mixes in July, organized in cooperation with JCEE, and our partners from GIZ and JCEE will tell you more about energy mixes and how Germany and Egypt are engaged in this field. So do follow us on Facebook and on social media to find more about our events. Today, we're here to talk about biogas and how it can be used to support an energy transition towards cleaner and economies that preserve the climate. Biomass, and biogas specifically, have been playing a key role in Germany's energy transition, with biogas providing 28.7 billion kilowatt hours in 2020. Egypt, with its important agricultural sector, has a huge potential for developing biogas, and especially decentralized biogas production. And I'm very happy that the Egyptian government has already taken note of this enormous potential of biogas production by launching 60 biogas units in El Minya. And I'm really looking forward to hearing more about what is happening here in Egypt and indeed all over the world today in this regard. And for this, I would like to thank our panelists and our moderator for joining us here today to give us their perspective on the potential of biogas. Thank you to all of you and to the CCT team for making this event possible. And finally, let me also reiterate my thanks to all of our partners and stakeholders, and of course, in particular, the Egyptian Ministry of Environment, which is led by Her Excellency the Minister, Dr. Yasmin Fouad, and represented here today by Dr. Ali Abu Sena. Thank you for your continuous support for our climate talks, and thank you for your great work for the environment here in Egypt. My thanks also go to everyone here in our audience for joining us here today, and I wish all of us a very informative exchange of ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Philippe, for your opening remarks. And coming up next, Dr. Ali Abu Sena, Minister of Environment Assistant for Projects, Ministry of Environment of the Republic Arab of Egypt. And for his opening remarks, I just had, okay, so unfortunately, Dr. Ali is not here with us at the moment. So whenever he comes, he will give us his opening remarks. Okay, thank you, Mr. Philippe, again for your valuable remarks. And as soon as Dr. Ali arrives, we will proceed on this. However, now I'd like to remind you again on the translation that we have both English and Arabic interpretations for this event. بالعربي هقولها تاني في البرنامج النهارده مترجم موجود بالعربي. للي عايز هيلاقي في كلمة interpretation تحت على اليمين، هندوس عليها علامة الكوكب هنختار بس الجيرمان channel وهنلاقي فيها الترجمة الفورية. Okay. Back to English because I have to give myself the mental note. So before we start introducing our esteemed panelists, I'd like to provide a bit of context on today's topic. The main protagonist here is biogas, which is within the family of the biomass or the bioenergy family. And I'd want to give the simplest explanation I can offer for our esteemed attendees. So basically, biogas is a biofuel that is produced from organic waste. That organic waste can be food leftovers, agricultural waste, animal manure, anything that is organic, basically. So what happens in a nutshell? And given our context here, it's about rural areas. So we'll be talking about how to produce biogas in our farms, for instance. Let's say we have leftovers, we have animal manure, we have any leftovers from agricultural activities. We choose not to throw them away or composting them right away or using them as fertilizers, just to make it simpler. We use them, we take them, collect them in some sort of a container-like tank. It's called a digester. That digester, without getting into any technical details, just leave it inside. Some organic chemical magic happens within, and this waste is decomposed. We have our biogas that we use for heating, for cooking, or for lighting, different cases, as Zgheda will tell us more later. And the rest of the waste or the decomposed waste can be used as compost to nurture the soil and the agricultural lands. So that is in a nutshell, and please, I'd like for our esteemed panelists to explain further if they have any more remarks regarding the matter. But before doing so, I'd love to introduce our panelists for today. Ghada Ahmadin, Minna Gum'a, Mahmoud El-Tuhami, and Miguel Batron. Sorry. So starting with Ghada Ahmadin, she is the program assistant of the GEF Small Grants Program in Egypt since 2010. She is a communication and networking specialist with experience and professional practice of over 18 years in the field of environment and in dealing with non-governmental organizations active in the fields of environment and development. As for Minna Gum'a, She has been the ESG, which is the Environmental Social Governance Engagement and Corporate Reporting Director at Masodr since 2017. Masodr is a corporate sustainability consulting firm highly committed to creating sustainable and long-term solutions for its clients, and has led key environmental and social waste and energy projects in Egypt and MENA region over the recent years. As for Mahmoud El-Tuhami, unfortunately, he couldn't provide me with a direct bio, so I will introduce him to the best of my ability, and I hopefully would give him justice for his great work in the past 8 years. He is originally a civil engineer who, by passion and belief, turned into a bioengineer professional since he graduated in 2013. And since then, he has been working with the Ministry of Environment on several projects to disseminate the biogas technologies in rural Egypt. And most of his efforts has been directed towards technical support and technical trainings to our potential biogas professionals and technicians in the field. As for our last but not least panelist is Miguel Batron, and we are honored to have her join us from the other side of the world in Latin America, from Bolivia. She holds a master's degree in renewable energies technologies from San Simón University in Bolivia. This program was supported by the KTH Institute from Sweden. Magali has worked for around 10 years in the field of sustainability and green energies as project manager and mitigation to climate change consultant at Biosolar Energy School and Plurinational Authority of Mother. And for a bit of context of why I'm here, I'm Marwan Rasmi. I'm a master holder of energy engineering and for sustainable development from Politecnico di Milano in Italy. I have dedicated my academic research through my work, through my studies there, to design business models on how to share community-sized biogas units appropriate to Egypt's rural areas. And I'm currently the content and development coordinator at Greenish. So before we begin going into our questions, I would like to ask our attendees, if you have any questions for any of the panelists, please submit them into the Q&A box for these questions. The CCT team will collect them, and they will be directed to the speakers during the questions and answer session in the final segment of our evening. And I'd like to note that upon your registrations, you have submitted your questions, and we have made most of our efforts to include them within the questions that we are directing to our panelists in the following section. So I hope the introductions were appropriate, and please, if there's anything that you would like to add, any of the panelists, I'd love to hear them. If not, I'd like to first direct my first question to Reda. When we talked on the phone for our introductions, you've shared a lot of information and a lot of your experience that have been amazing, honestly, and that I personally wished I could have known these things while I was doing my academic research. And I'd love you to share that and help our attendees to learn from these experiences. So what I would love to hear from you, firstly, in brief, your journey with the Biogas project and how it started and how it emerged to be a very important aspect and a very valuable asset for some of the rural communities here in Egypt.
Thank you so much, Marwan, and thank you, the CCT, for having me and for having the Small Grants Program in this very significant event. Let me start by just giving a very quick brief about the Small Grants Program to the participants. It's a program, it's a funding mechanism that provides funds to the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations registered at the Ministry of Social Solidarity to implement projects in specific focal areas like the climate change, the biodiversity, the international waters, the land degradation, and the POPs. Well, under the climate change focal area, we have a lot of projects. The program has succeeded to fund more than 350 projects since it started in Egypt in 1992. Under the climate change focal area, we have a lot of projects like the recycling of agricultural waste, solid waste management, solar energy, energy efficiency, sustainable transport, and so on. And then we started our journey with the biogas. Actually, we started long years ago, but with another technology than the one has been or is used now. It was in collaboration with the Agricultural Research Center. And then since 2014, we have started our cooperation with the Biomass, or maybe 2013, with the Biomass energy project, which was implemented by the Ministry of Environment. Actually, this project is a full-size project funded by the GEF, the Global Environment Facility, and the Small Grants Program is a part of the GEF. So all the time, the Small Grants Program, through the small grants provided to the NGOs, we're trying to cooperate with the full-size projects implemented by other ministries. So this was one of the projects that we cooperated with. And actually, since our cooperation began, we have a lot of successes that we can share with the NGOs and with you and with all the partners. It started when the project, they focused their work in two governorates, in Fayoum and Asyut, in two specific villages in those governorates. And we collaborated to fund NGOs in those two governorates. The main objective of those NGOs was, the projects funded then, was to promote this technology, the Indian new technology in rural areas. As they focused only their work in two villages, the main objective was how to expand and promote this technology in other villages and in other governorates as well. So we funded two NGOs back then, one in Fayoum and one in Asyut. And they succeeded to have a lot of activities. The one in Asyut, for example, they organized more than 35 seminars to farmers, local authorities, women, youth, and so on, engineers, and so on. And they conducted also field visits to the implemented or installed biogas units then by the full-size project. And they gathered more than 2,000 requests from farmers to install biogas in their lands. So they tried their best to convince the farmers on the benefits of the biogas units and how they can install them very easily, because they convinced them by, through the visits, through the seminars, which were conducted in full coordination as well with the full-size project then. In Fayoum, they trained 20 young women, and those women, they conducted more than 3,000 door-to-door visits to talk to the women there in Fayoum villages, not in Tamaya only, but in the surrounding villages, as I mentioned. And they also had a waiting list of the farmers that they are convinced and they want to install the biogas units in their lands. So this was a very good success of the two projects. And in another phase, we funded the NGOs to implement the biogas units or install biogas units. So in another phase, we funded 7 more NGOs. So we had this in this phase, 9 NGOs in total working on biogas only. The main components of those NGOs projects were 3 components. The first one is raising the awareness about the technology and the benefits of the biogas units. The second one is installing the biogas units in the lands in cooperation with the biomass energy project, and then also to nominate engineers and workers to be trained. And the full-size project supported those engineers and workers to establish their startups working on biogas. So this was a very good result also for providing job opportunities and supporting those engineers and youth in having their own small-scale businesses. So those projects in operational phase 5 of the small grants program, they succeeded in installing 225 units in 15 communities and in other governorates than Fayoum and Asyut. In Bahira, we have it in Minya, we have in Beni Suef, in Daqahliya, and in Bahira in several communities and so on, and also in Asyut and Fayoum, but in other communities than the one we started with. In operational phase 6 of the small grants program, which has started in 2017 till 2021, we also have 3 projects working on biogas, and now they are installing those biogas as well in cooperation and in full coordination with the Bioenergy Foundation, which was the result of the biomass project and sustainable for now. So I think those projects wouldn't have been a success without the partnership with the Ministry of Environment and with the project and the foundation now, and also without the efforts done by the NGOs, because the NGOs, they're the one really can contact and can reach out to the people on the ground, to the farmers and the women and so on. And also they succeeded to have this partnership with the National Council for Women, to have them as a main partner, to reach out to women, because they are the one suffering to have the energy and so on. So yes, I think this was, in brief, our journey with biogas, and we are continuing to have biogas in our program, even in operational phase 7, which is starting early next year for another 4 years.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much, Shaheda. This is like really valuable, and we want to capitalize on that. However, speaking of the Ministry of Environment, Dr. Ali Abu Senna has honored us with his presence, and now I'd love to give him the floor for a short keynote speech before we continue with our discussion. So Dr. Ali, welcome, and thank you for being here.
I'm sorry for being late. I was just jumping in. So thank you very much for inviting us for this important seminar. And I would briefly give you overview about the bioenergy and biogas as a really trend to be applied in Egypt. So as you know, the Ministry of Environment have been established the Bioenergy Association, which is mainly working for promoting of biomass technologies. One of the biomass technologies is the biogas, And as my colleague Ghada was speaking right now about the history behind this initiative, that it was a program between the UNDP and the Ministry of Environment to introduce the biogas units for the rural areas. The technology have been brought out from similar countries to us like India and China, and have been adapted to the Egyptian situation. The idea to support the rural areas to find a way to cheaper and accessible energy sources, and biogas is one of these types of bioenergy that could be serving our people in the rural areas. And at the same time, it was also very important to create job opportunities for youth through establishing small and medium enterprises that working in the field of installation and maintenance and promotion type of technology. Actually, there is a lot of changes happening right now. It is now on the top of the agenda of the Egyptian government to promote the biogas. Why? As you know, we have the presidential initiative called the Life Initiative, around 100 villages which are considered as a high need villages. And actually, it was the good news that the biogas have been actually selected and endorsed by the President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi as one of the initiatives that has to be included in the decentralized initiative. So it means that for all these 1,500 villages, that biogas initiative will be one part of this program. And of course, the role of the Biogas Association or Bioenergy Association is will be providing technical assistance and also financial support, and also supporting the SMEs to be created and trained in this respect. So I would say that over the last years, that with different stakeholders like UNDP, with also working with the small grant program, that we were able to establish more than 1,600 units. We also brought some partnership with the banking sector to support some establishment of units in clusters. Like last year, we had a great project we finalized in Minya, in one of the cities there. I'm sorry, villages there, and this was a very good success. This year also will continue with another cluster of biogas units in Suhag. And on the other hand, this is actually for the small units, but the association also is working on the big scale, which the large scale units. So we were helping the Ministry of Environment to create a waste to energy program, which targeting the big size, mega size units, like the units to produce biogas from the very big farms, manure farms, or from the sludge, or from the old landfills. So we have created with a Prime Minister decree a waste to energy tariff that facilitating the investment in this sector. So, and we already called for expression of interest for international and local companies to work on establishing such big units in Egypt, and we received more than 92 co-applications, and we selected 52 companies, and now we are presenting a roadmap and investment opportunity for these companies to start this program. On the other hand, we were able to finalize a very detailed engineering design study for the big units, and would be a know-how for the association to support the implementation of the big units. On the other hand, we were also successful to initiate central units, small or medium-sized central units in some villages, and also in the farms. Like we have just finalized 8 big units in Minya. It's in one of agro-food company to produce biogas to be used in the production process. And, and in this way, we are moving forward, as this is a big opportunity to produce biogas and fertilizer, which are very high added value. But I would be back to that we are now part of this presidential initiative for decent life, which will create a lot of opportunity for the coming 5 years to the association to work. And this means that we need to have to create more than companies, because we created already around 27 companies. This will not be enough for this big initiative. We also created a bioenergy fund to support the NGOs and also the small companies with 40% grant and 60% a very subsidized loan to establish units in the rural areas. Also, we are preparing also a new project to be finalized very soon in the zoo, Giza Zoo, to have a project which is the first of its kind to produce biogas from the manure waste from the Giza Zoo, which will be having a very good image, and also will be very helpful to the zoo to raise its ranking, international ranking, which they are meeting the environmental standards. And at the same time, we will use in this pilot a new technology. It's called the GLS. I mean, it's a glass lined metal, which will be the first time to be used in Egypt in the small units. This will be also a good demonstration, one which could be replicated and the local manufacturing in Egypt. The last thing I wanted to finalize also that part of the activities of the association, because we are looking for biomass technology not only for biogas. So we started and we finalized successfully a new project for bringing gasification technology to Egypt, small gasification unit. Actually, we'll open it this week or beginning of next week in Fayoum. This is a small unit. We brought it from Norway, and it's available to small and rural areas, and with capacity around 2.5 mixed waste per day, 2.5 tons mixed waste per day. This will be a very good to be upskilled on the all rural areas, matching our nature of a type of waste. And the role of the association to bring this technology and demonstrate it, and then we'll go for upscaling it to the whole country as part of the national program for the strategy for waste management. So this is what I wanted to see. The example of the Biomass Association is a partnership between the government and the NGO and banking sector, with also international partners and NGOs, like also the small grant program, UNDP small grant program. We were working very closely with them to demonstrate this. And I'm sure that will be having a more impact in the future, that will put the association on another stage, focusing on small units for small for rural areas, but also for the big units, which are actually focusing on the big farms to be also implemented in Egypt. So this I
Yes,
wanted
thank you.
to say. Thank you very
Yes,
much.
thank you so much, Dr. Ali, for like the wide landscape of the biogas scene in Egypt. And honestly, yes, I do agree, or like I think we all do agree that the biogas production is the potential for all rural areas and for even some of the urban capacities here in Egypt. And we really do thank you for your keynote speech, and it has been of great value to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And given that interesting landscape, I'd like to get back to comment on what Ghada was just saying, that the general efforts of the project in the rural areas, and how to disseminate the project, and how to disseminate the technologies of biogas production, and how to make sure that most of the stakeholders are interested and benefiting from the application of such dissemination. I'd like to go to Minna Jum'a. I wanted to capitalize on your experience when it comes to stakeholder engagement and your understanding of how the local value chains work for achieving the sustainable development goals in Egypt, especially in our vision like Egypt 2030. I'm sure you're too much involved into working in that. In your opinion, I'd love to know, what do we need to do next? Like, what are the next steps that we need to effectively engage the local stakeholders and the stakeholders in general? And in which international industry practices that we need to follow in order to strengthen these foundations that we've built throughout the past 10 years and that we're going to build upon the upcoming years. So, yes.
First, allow me to tell you thank you very much for having me today, and I'm happy that I'm amongst Mrs. Ghada and Mr. Mahmoud and Mr. Ali. Of course, it's a great pleasure to be amongst you. So let me please, Marwan, take you a step back. And before I dive into the stakeholder engagement and its importance, I'd like to shed some light on the global context with regards to the water, food, energy nexus, which is basically the topic that has been repeatedly mentioned. So, and it's a central core to the sustainable development. So in this, and actually the water and food energy nexus is due to the increased demand of all three, driving by a rising global population and the rapid urbanization and economic growth. So agriculture is the largest consumer of the world's freshwater resources, and more than a quarter of the energy consumed on food production and supply. So the interdependent linkage between the water, food, and energy is critical, and it's required for, and in order to maintain it properly, we need to have some sort of a suitable integrated approach to ensure water and food security and sustainable agriculture and energy production. So working towards new business models and developing businesses using the circular economy approach to boost value creation and long-term benefits, it's basically essential. So focusing on biogas in specific, biogas production directly contributes to the several SDGs, as most of you know, SDG 1, which is poverty, affordable and clean energy, SDG 7, and SDG 9 when it comes to industry, innovation, and infrastructure. So, and it also supports the second pillar of Egypt's vision, 2030. So the biogas is basically, in brief, an energy sector meeting national sustainable development requirements, and it maximizes efficient use of various traditional renewable resources, contributing to our economic growth, achieving social justice, and preserving, of course, the environment. So sustainability has proven to be very important recently, as companies are struggling to keep track in such dynamic environments. So biogas in rural communities represent the perfect example for a circular economy solution. In that sense, from our work experience in corporate sustainability and resource efficiency in specific, we could say risk management and change management have proven to be fundamental, and this is where stakeholder engagement comes. So stakeholder engagement is a vital key to a successful design of any biogas or actually any renewable energy program in order to fulfill and meet the actual needs of its receiving communities. So in order to obtain the greatest added value for the economy, society, and the environment, we need to strive for a well-prepared stakeholder engagement. A stakeholder engagement's overall objective is to define a system anticipating an ideal scenario of communication between all project stakeholders, which includes public information disclosure and consultation throughout the entire project lifecycle, from construction to operation and so on. Plus, it sets a regular and well-planned monitoring and reporting system. Something essential and a pillar of stakeholder engagement and important to understand is stakeholder engagement does not represent information dissemination from one side only, but it's rather a two-way communication between citizens and the government and all other stakeholders, leading to the citizens' right and participation in decision-making in order to ensure and improve the project's intended basically outcomes. So add to that, stakeholder engagement enables ending up with a community that fully understands its benefits and the benefits behind this project, their financial benefits, the problems that could occur in their localities, and have better ideas on where to spend their money and how to manage things more efficiently. So we've witnessed in Masadir first-hand experience on a mega project, Ben, which is world's largest solar park, how actually collaboration and cooperation have had a very positive impact on multiple sub-projects within Ben, where social inclusion and creation of partnerships and modification of corporate policies have been constantly updated to ensure diversity and empowerment of women. It was basically the perfect formula. So we usually use different approaches to develop stakeholder engagement plans, depending, of course, on the complexity and the number of stakeholder groups. But one or more key activities always happen in stakeholder engagement, which is consultation, participation, and designing grievance redress mechanisms. So to wrap up, in order to design an effective stakeholder engagement plan, we need to study and analyze the target market. We have to correctly identify stakeholders and cover mainly specific groups. And there are three mainly: affected parties, who are the impacted or likely to be impacted directly or indirectly, positively or negatively. For instance, farmers and local communities. So these are the affected parties. The interested parties, who are mainly the government, suppliers, media, who could potentially influence the project outcomes in a way or another and have an interest in the project. And the most important group is the vulnerable groups, who are key in a stakeholder engagement to take into consideration. And here, by vulnerable groups, we mean women, children, and elders, who actually, due to their vulnerable status, may require special engagement efforts to ensure their equal representation in consultation and in any decision-making process associated with the project. As we know, agriculture is the largest employer of women in Egypt, with almost 45% of women in the workforce. So although these figures might not be capturing the real involvement and contribution of women in agriculture-related activities, but rural women's roles in farming activities are more diversified and enlarged recently. And according even to CapMass, even 50% of rural women are actively involved in these informal tasks. So we need to take them and prepare them and have them on board and make sure that they have been integrated correctly.
And we'd like to get back to that at a certain point in the conversation, because I do think that we can capitalize on this specific point. And honestly, I couldn't agree more on, like, I don't know where to start, either the circular economy or the how to engage the specific aspects. And thank you so much for your valuable insight on this regard. Because this is going to be a question that I'd want to direct to both you and Ms. Ghada in a future question. And just like, let's hold that thought and let's keep it, because we do need it. Okay, so I'd like to talk to Engineer Mahmoud on like throughout his experience. First of all, hello. Like I hope I've introduced you properly within my capacity, and please, if there's something else you want to add, I'd love you to add it. But I wanted to know from your experience specifically, it's more of a technical background and more based on a capacity building program side. Like, you focused on training the startups that wanted to work in the biogas. You've trained the trainees. I wanted to understand how, first of all, the project has targeted these potential startups, and how nowadays, specifically after you've incubated these startups, how the Bioenergy Association for Sustainable Rural Development, where you do work at this moment, keep on incubating new talents in the fields of bioenergy.
Thank you, Marwan. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for inviting me with you. Firstly, as Ghada said, that the bioenergy project, which started in 2012, something in this area, in this time, this project starts firstly to install more than 1,000 household biogas units. After that, we're going to train engineering and masons on installing and operating and maintain biogas units. Firstly, we start with farmers. As you know, when you are talking about biogas with farmers, they don't know about how gas we're generating from the manure. This is the one of the problem which we meet it in the when we start the project. After that, first we making awareness for them, and we told them about biogas, and we told them that you already use this manure for cooking in some area, on some village. They use already this manure and use it for cooking by burning it directly. But we told them also about how use it, but by technology or by biogas units. After we started to making awareness for the farmers, we start with engineers. We invited engineers to training on biogas units. Firstly, we make a day for them to told them about biogas. We text them with all of the steps of installing biogas units, and we also connect the theoretical knowledge from faculty of something like this to the biogas units. After, as Ghada said, we started in two governorate, Fayoum and Asyut, and in two village we installed first laser 50 biogas units. Then we start with 50, another 50 in Fayoum. We trained engineers in these two village, and masons also. We trained some like 10 engineers at least in the two village. We started with engineer by the engineers who are in these villages or in this area. We told them about the biogas, and we make awareness for them, and all of them were happy to take the training with us. After we making a training with the engineers, we install more, we construct for them companies working in biogas field. We trained them on marketing biogas. We trained them on installing not manufacture. We only used the fixed dome model, which built by brick and cement, not the manufacture units. After we finished training, we construct for them a biogas, a company working in the field of biogas. After that, we have already a project, bioenergy project, to install 1,000 biogas units. There is an application come from for us from the NGOs, from the farmers, from the people who want to install biogas units. After we take this application, we making we call all of this company and told them and give them some of this applications. They going to the field and install the biogas units for them. Some of this company are already going in the field and they make marketing for himself and bring biogas unit for him. We already in this project. Firstly, we start by installing biogas unit for free. After this, we started to make the beneficiary give some money to install this project, this biogas unit. The companies started in the field, working in the field, started to going to install biogas units. After that, after the project finished, this is the association, Bioenergy Association, started by extended of this project to do the same thing, but in large scale or in large amount of biogas unit. We didn't working on a small amount of biogas unit. We working on more than or any number of biogas units. Our association, Bioenergy Association, as Dr. Ali mentioned, it's founded by Environmental Ministry. It's aimed to give funded and technical support and making feasibility study and making a green job for the people. After our association also working as a project work, but in more continuous than the project. We do the same what we do in the project, but in, as I said, in a large scale. We trained engineers, as Dr. Ali said. We have project last year on Mania. We installed more than 60 biogas units here in Mania Governorate. We trained engineers there. Already there are some of biogas units there. We make rehabilitation for it, and we make also development for this biogas unit to be easy for farmers to use it, and we develop this biogas unit. Already Bioenergy Association have a lot of work in biogas field. We working in a feasibility study, making a feasibility study for large scale biogas units. We're making a strategy, a national strategy for biomass in general. We already using technology of gasification in Fayoum. All of this project we do it. We already start with Giza Zoo to install biogas units there in Giza Zoo with the manure of the animals there. All of
Yes,
this
and
project.
honestly, these are the efforts that we actually need, like at the moment, in order to proceed with disseminating the efforts, even not even the technologies, but even to create this level of awareness to make everyone understand the importance of such efforts and such technologies in the development of our rural areas. And for that, we do thank the association and the efforts coming from the ministry, because without these plans and efforts, these the road to development wouldn't have been paved in the first place. And for that, I'd like to just I want to get back to you, Wardo, on a certain point later, Engineer Mahmoud, and before we doing so, I just want to get to have a more abstract point and look more outside of Egypt, and how the efforts of different experience in different countries would actually look like. Is it similar? Is it not? And for that, we do have Miguel Batron, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. And are you here with us, Miguel?
Yes, I am
yes,
here.
Yes,
Can you hear me?
First of all, yes, I can hear you. First of all, I'd like to thank you for being with us, and I'd like to hear more about your work in the biogas production field, given that you have a different context and you're adding a different perspective to what we're doing. And at the same time, I would want to understand, what did you find similar between the experiences and what is completely different? And from that, we can even share our experiences and understand more about how to exchange these expertise. Magadi.
Okay. Thank you very much for the invitation to this 73rd Keynote Climate Talk. My work with biogas field started in 2010 with my bachelor degree project in Cochabamba municipality from Bolivia. The idea was to collect the organic content of municipal solid waste and to process it in a biodigester lagoon type. This project elaboration concluded in 2011 with the support of Swiss cooperation in Bolivia with the program Ecovecindarios. For this project, I needed to get information from rural communities. It's for that reason I contacted some NGOs and associations that were working with the farmers in rural communities. Before the survey, I explained the goal of the project and the importance to getting the information. For my surprise, most of the farmers know about the technology of biogas, because GIZ, who is the German cooperation here in Bolivia, started with a small project with biodigester lagoon type with a plastic as a raw material. Then some of them told me like, it doesn't work, it needs someone to be attentive to its process and maintenance, or it only works 6 months and then we need to take out it. With my supervisor, we decided to start a training course of 2 weeks with the university in my city. The idea of this training was to teach the people and to train technical people about complete technology that involves a biodigester. There are different technologies about biodigesters, but if you have a small technology, cheaper technology, that means that it will work only short time. If you have more technology, it would work more time, but it depends of the technology and it depends of the technicians related to this field. After this experience, a farmer that was in this training group, he was producing vegetables in rural area. He contacted me in order to elaborate a project and implement a biodigester of 20 cubic meter. Then he wanted to try our technology because he saw the future convenience of the use of fertilizer produced by biodigestion, and additionally the energy supply for his farm. He was using this technology during 5 years, and then for the low income for farmers, he decided to leave his farm activity and start a mining business. Another experience is with a pig farm with 2,000 cubic meters biodigester. He was collecting the wastewater of 7,000 pigs. The owner decided to use the biodigester technology in order to clean his wastewater and then deliver it to the nearest river. Until the project, he had a big problem with payments to the environmental department of the municipality for deliver directly this wastewater to the river. For him, it was better to use this money for some solution than to pay sanctions. Additionally, he noticed that some banks were promoting sustainable technologies for environmental problems reduction with low interest rate. Then he took this advantage and started to implement this biodigester. But at 60% of advance, a meat crisis was happening in Brazil. It was happening that the price of the meat was decreasing highly. Before the crisis, the price of meat of pig was like $2 per kilogram, and at that time was 80 cents of dollar per kilogram. Then the farmer decided to pause the project until today. This biodigester was already working and was producing biogas, but we need to clean this biogas in order to produce electricity. That was the missing part. The last experience that we have was in Brazil with 2,000 cubic meters biodigester that processed sludge from a farm and produce biogas and fertilizers. The owner used this fertilizer for its coffee plantations and the biogas for part of the farm electrification. Which similarities I see between Bolivia and Egypt is the organic content in our waste, municipal solid waste, an opportunity in order to implement biodigesters, the necessity to create awareness in the people, training people, to have technology, to develop maybe some new technology that can be applied in our countries. Additionally, maybe the big difference here is that your government is more involved with this technology. For us was more difficult because we started as an entrepreneurship with the university. It's true that equal than in Egypt, in our 2030 agenda, we have this increasing the participation of renewable energies, but we have the solar potential, high solar potential. Then the government is more with focus in that area. Biomass is like, we know about that technology, but the most income now and easy is the solar technology. That is the idea with the government, but we need to promote because as in Egypt, we have a lot of farms and our main greenhouse gas emissions are related to forests and additionally solid waste management.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you honestly for pointing this out. Yani, One of the things I've noticed that most of the conversations in Bolivia and Brazil is towards electrification rather than doing it using biogas as like directly in heating and like in the thermal use, which was an interesting thing. Like this is something that we haven't yet had a full conversation about, and like for future conferences, not for today, but this is something that we would love to learn from and understand. Okay, so now what do we need to do? How do we build that narrative in order to understand the narratives and to understand how to develop or jump into the electrification process from biogas? And for that, thank you so much. So I think the time is kind of running short. Apart from asking all the remaining questions that I had in mind, I'll have a general question that I'd love Ms. Ghada and Ms. Minna and Engineer Mahmoud to reflect on, if that's possible. That, okay, so we've talked a lot about the benefits and a lot about what's happening in the scene in a more or less general way, which is we need because we need to understand how it goes. But one thing I've remembered to mention before we proceed, I just wanted to mention to the attendees that the floor for question and answer are still there. Please add your questions that you need you need the panelists to answer to in order to have them answer them after the discussion, which is going to be very soon. So yes, so coming back to the point, which is, okay, so now all these benefits, there's a lot of indirect benefits that we are talking about. How do we quantify these? Like how do we set parameters for the success and the sustainability and the success and sustainability of these projects and these efforts? And at the same time, after all the support is done, because at the end of the day, we can't always support or incentivize these kind of efforts. At a certain point, we need to have a market with a proper supply and demand and understand how these things work. How do we make these companies or like teach these companies or reach a point where these companies can properly govern their own operations? I think I'll start with Minna, and I'd love Ms. Ghada to reflect on it as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Marwan. So let me tell you, and which brings also back to one of the questions of the attendees about the risks behind such projects. And so I'll take you very briefly. Any project, biogas or renewable energy project, has positive and negative environmental and social impacts and has, of course, risks. So in order for the negative ones have to be effectively mitigated, and the program and initiative as a whole has to be monitored and evaluated, exactly as you mentioned. So let me give you an example. So the positive impacts, as all the panelists mentioned, the job creations and the new market opportunities, and even environmentally, the improved air quality and health achieved through reduced, uncontrolled, of course, waste burning, and of course, triggering the research and development behind and the technologies arising from the biogas in general studies is big and huge. However, there are a lot of negative environmental and social risks and impacts. Even Mrs. Magali mentioned it now with a great example. And for instance, let's take it a step back, the beneficiary dissatisfaction, either with the performance or for not being selected in the first place, or unacceptable labor and working conditions for small scale biogas, negative environmental impacts during construction, health and safety impacts during, for instance, operation. So in order to mitigate these, there are special instruments, as you mentioned. We usually develop one or more instruments depending on the adopted, of course, legal framework, country system alone, or required by the donor financial institutions. For instance, the environmental and social impact assessment, environmental and social management plan on micro scale even projects, which is basically implementing and monitoring and mitigating the mitigation measures with the full roles and responsibilities identified for each stakeholder, even on a strategic level, and even sometimes some projects, they require labor management procedures, and these are documents developed in order to ensure good working and labor conditions. So all these instruments, they focus on identifying the impacts, adopting the mitigation measures, identify the residual impacts, develop the environmental and social management and monitoring system with indicators. And I consider this as the first level or layer for the monitoring system. So sometimes it's perceived as a burden, but it's a base besides the management and monitoring basically plan, and I can guide you later on the different indicators, but I'd like to leave the floor if needed.
Yes, and honestly, I personally want to go through all these conversations with every single one of you on a personal level, because this is very interesting in itself, and it can take days and days of conversations. I think only 45 minutes doesn't do the topic justice at all. I'd like to برضو refer to Ms. Ghada on this specific point. Like you were mentioning that the project, that there is an initiation of a new phase in the start of the next year. So I wanted to ask you, so what's next? What do we have next, and how do we incorporate all the aspects and parameters that Minna just has mentioned into these phases and into the mindset of the rural areas and the companies working?
Okay. Well, I totally agree with Minna on what she said on having those impacts quantified, and we have indicators on that. But actually, we're only dealing with NGOs, and the NGOs in Egypt, they have very limited capacities to do this. So I think this kind of studies, I think that the association and the Ministry of Environment, in collaboration with other maybe consulting firms or others or experienced consultants, they could reach those indicators and quantifying things. But from our experience with the NGOs in the rural areas and previous projects, well, of course, the benefits are really, a lot, and the people, they're not seeing those very, limited negative impacts, because the benefits, they are, a lot. They have those health benefits, because not only of burning the wastes, but even if having those wastes kept in the barns and so on, they were having a lot of diseases like eye diseases, respiratory diseases, and so on. And the people themselves, from those beneficiaries, they have said that they have saved the money they were always, spending on health issues now, and also having the sustainable energy instead of having, this risk of having the energy through the bioethane cylinders and so on. And as Minna said, she mentioned the SDGs, involved in this biogas. And I would like to add also SDG 6, Goal 6 on the gender equality, because I think women, as you said, as the vulnerable target groups, the women are really the one, the main beneficiaries, and the main target group that we should look at, because they were the ones suffering of having to carry those cylinders and then go to have to walk for long distances to have those cylinders and go back to their homes. As for the risks you mentioned through the installed biogas units, actually, I think that for a start, in 2014, the units were for free for the people, for the beneficiaries. Okay, so they were like still examining what's going on, and you know, and trying to know what are the benefits, trying to you know, evaluate the compost coming out, and see if they're going to use them in their land or sell them and have economic other benefits from other farmers and so on. But now, and from other projects or further projects that we have implemented, no, the beneficiaries and the farmers should contribute. They contributed first with 50% of the total cost of the unit, just to know because they once they are convinced with the benefits, they contribute. They contribute in kind and in cash to have those units in their lands. They are trained on how to maintain, you know, those units and to keep them working all the time. And if not, they couldn't provide the maintenance, they can go back for assistance from the startups or the companies of the biogas. And now in the coming phases, and the coming phase, especially for the small grants program, and having new projects on biogas within the presidential initiative of Haya Karima, I think now we're having the beneficiary to pay for almost 100% of the cost. And why is that? Because the NGOs, they are using the revolving fund mechanism, okay, and having the money back, they can have more units and have more beneficiaries to come into this cycle, and not only having to select a small number of farmers and beneficiaries, and you know, and excluding others that they also want the units. So I think, yes, of course, I believe that we need the studies, we need to know more of the indicators and so on, but actually the NGOs couldn't do this, but we rely on the ministry and the association to do that and to share those results with us, which will be very beneficial for us, and to share with the NGOs as well. And also we're looking forward to have more partners, as you said, with the stakeholder engagement and the consultations. Of course, you know, when we start a new phase, the first thing we do is the consultation in the landscapes and the governorates we're targeting. And we put or include the kind of projects or the type of projects based on the needs and the demands of the local community. So biogas was one of them. So we're looking forward to having more projects to expand in this and promote, of course, the technology in rural areas, in more communities. Thank you.
And this is exactly why we have these conversations. We connect with one another, we connect with the audience, we understand exactly the landscape of either the non-governmental aspect and the corporate aspect and the political aspect. We need all to understand how it's going in order to connect them all at the end of the day. And Bartu, still, this is 10 years is nothing in terms of systems, and in terms of building foundations of something that would sustain for hundreds of years, or maybe more, hopefully, if there is a planet at that point. But hopefully, yes, we want to capitalize on these conversations and work on them. And honestly, you were mentioning something when it comes to financing and the farmers having to pay the full price, and sometimes this is not exactly convenient to everyone. So there was a question from the audience, which was very appropriate to the topic at hand, Yani. Is there some sort of a plan to introduce different financing options for these micro investments? Or maybe I can add a bit to the question, Bardo, if there is some sort of a different ownership models these programs? I mean, does a farmer need to own a biogas digester or a biogas plant in order to use it, or can it be just a shared community, like a community shared? Because that's like the part that I personally like, that how to have a whole community share within, or a cooperative share within this biodigester. Is this part of the plan? Is it considered? What are the guidelines for such things?
Let me explain something in this. We're always targeting to have more partners to contribute to those projects. Not only us as a small grants program and the contribution of the farmers, of course. So as Dr. Ali has mentioned, that there is a new funding mechanism that the association is providing now, with the 40% grant and the 60% soft loans submitted to the NGOs and the companies to use. So this is also another funding mechanism that we have thought together and as partners. And but we need, of course, to facilitate the procedures for the NGOs to make it more smoother, to make them, available to more NGOs as well. So this is one of the funding new funding mechanisms that have started, and of course we're looking all the time to have more partners to come and share. But this wouldn't, stop the contribution of the beneficiary, because we have experienced this. If we're having this, if beneficiary or the farmer is having the unit for free, they do not, maintain it properly, actually. So we're trying all the time to have it affordable and with soft installments and so on, but they should have their share in the units. So we are trying to do this, and through new mechanisms also in cooperation with the association and the Ministry of Environment.
Yes. Okay. So we have two final questions, like a follow-up on this question to Minna, and then a question to Engineer Mahmoud. So as you were talking, Minna, about like the circular economy and connecting it to the financing options, like knowing that the circular economy is a whole different economic model, that per business model, it depends on how you look at it from scale. Do you think that the current business models and the current financial options, and at the same time the current banking services, are adaptable or convenient to models such as circular economy? Because at the end of the day, you can turn a product into a service rather than just selling it as, like I was saying, like as a digester. You can sell it as a service of having biogas or having fertilizer, or maybe a service of cooking, how much cooking that you, it depends on how you look at it. And you're the expert at this, like that, more than engineer. What is, yeah.
So your question is rather whether the circular economy approach has been taken into consideration, and if it helps in the business model. Of course, the business models need, of course, to change and develop. As I mentioned at the beginning, it needs new mindsets, it needs new models from a finance, of course, mechanism, but also from a perspective on how to integrate, and taking on Mrs. Reda's point about integrating all stakeholders and making sure that they are all aware, the financial benefits are clear and are well communicated and everything. So all of this, of course, is the most important. So I would always also go back to the economic factor playing a bigger role in these, specifically with the beneficiaries. So when it comes to, in specific, the bank, I just want to add also the point on Mrs. Gheda's point, the commercial banks also need some sort of awareness and come hand in hand as partners, the private, I mean banks and everything, in order to give loans and to facilitate as well this. And this has been happening also over the course but on other, not necessarily the biogas, I'm not quite sure about this, but I mean other projects and solar PVs, the banks have been going into. So the system itself of renewable energy or biogas plant, it's the idea of having a new project in a local community that is quite challenging in all perspectives. So the economic factor is always the most important. It needs to be well, as Mrs. Gheda said, the financial benefits needs to be clear. All the benefits needs to be clear in terms of health and well communicated. But of course, there are barriers when it comes to limited financial feasibility or it's perceived as a high risk, low bankability, I would say, of financing biogas, diluted knowledge base and lack of financial products, weak evidence based decision making. The stakeholder engagements are usually not done properly. So all of these factors need a huge awareness between all parties, between the banks, between and of course all the technical assistance that have been going on. As Engineer Mahmoud mentioned, this is one of the biggest factors that our government is giving or the financial institutions are providing. But in general, circular economy has been there in many aspects with all the renewable energy, products. However, it's the business idea. It's a business idea at the end of the day, and its scalability and everything is exactly as any other, I would say, business, but it's moving forward.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Minna, for that. And for our last question, Engineer Mahmoud, I think you've been more into the technicalities of biogas in rural areas and how you can implement them and install these units for most of the beneficiaries. Someone was asking, what are the clear, what are the guidelines? Is there أصلاً a guidelines for biogas production in rural areas? And if there is, what are they? If there isn't, why isn't there?
Okay. About biogas units which we install in rural area, firstly, we should have manure, as you know, for installing this biogas units. Because biogas is coming from the organic material like manure, chicken manure, sludge from the wastewater treatment plants. About rural area, we can install two types of biogas units. One in the farmers, like on cow manure. The second aspect that we should take before starting installing biogas units with the farmer, we should know first if he will continuous for feeding the biogas unit or not, because if he didn't feeding it, it will stop already. So we firstly should know that the farmers have at least 2 or 3 house, 2 or 3 cow or buffalo, by something like 50 kilogram per day at least from cow manure. It's produced from him to at least 2 cubic meter biogas per day. So if you want to produce one cubic meter for biogas from the cow manure, you should have at least 25 kilogram per day. You will add with it at least 25 also liter of water. So if you want to know what the guidelines for installing biogas units in farmers, firstly, he should have manure. He should have the area which we install the biogas unit for it. We should be sure that the farmer will continuous feeding the biogas units. After that, we should know, as Ms. Rada said, about he should sharing with the cost of the biogas unit, because all of the biogas units which making of for free, it isn't continuous. It already have problems because the farmers don't know. He said it isn't my unit, it's yours. So if the farmers don't have the interest in biogas units,
but there's always a question of accountability and who's responsible for it and who's not. If that's what you mean.
Yeah. Yes. He asking about this, but we should choose the farmers who interested in biogas units. Or the I'm not talking about farmers only. I'm talking about the beneficiary for general. If you want to the biogas unit continuous or sustainable, you should choose the perfect one who interested on the biogas unit, who have benefit from it, who use all of the benefit from gas or from slurry. Because most of people think that the biogas units use gas only, but the main important come out from the biogas unit is slurry. When we're talking about the economic from the benefit from the biogas unit, we said that at least 70% from slurry return back to the beneficiary, and 30% from the gas. So if you use it for electricity or for burning directly, the economist thing for the biogas unit is to for the gas is to burn it directly for small scale, or the large scale. For small scale, for cooking. For large scale, you can use it for boiler, something for factory of food waste, all of this.
Amazing, amazing. Honestly, yes. يعني برضو to clarify something, in general, biogas, you can use it as a replacement to natural gas, and the byproduct, like I'm telling to the attendees برضو to just and at the same time, when it comes to biofertilizers or the compost, you can use it as a replacement to the chemical fertilizers or the compost that is already present in the market. It's always a win-win situation when you have your own organic waste, rather than just composting them or leaving them in free air to decompose. The benefit from biogas digesters is that you have them decompose within a contained space that doesn't have any oxygen with it, so it does not really propagate diseases, or and it is in a way healthier. On that note, I'd like to thank you all for your fruitful inputs and your valuable insights. And now that we've concluded our Q&A session, I'd like to thank everyone for attending and for having to bear with us for the extra 6 to 10 minutes that we've added to the session. And I'd like to extend my thanks, of course, to our keynote speakers, Mr. Philippe Mopé and Dr. Ali Abu Sinna for their amazing input. As for the translation, thank you, Dr. Suhair and Dr. Miran, for your efforts and in interpreting the panel discussion live. This takes a lot of effort and a lot of dedication, so thank you for that. And last but not least, I want to express my gratitude to our panelists for being with us today and giving us their time, for providing their, as I've said, their valuable insights, and for everything, honestly, that you've added to this beautiful discussion. And it was really lovely meeting you all, and I, on a personal level, am honored. But before we go and say our goodbyes, I'd like to note that the next Cairo Climate Talk event is on the 4th of May, and it is revolving around sustainable makers and local crafts, as Mr. Philippe was mentioning in his keynote speak. And from a personal note, I honestly would love to be there and see what's going to happen, because at the end of the day, arts and crafts and artisans are the basis of everything that is modern. Without doing everything with our hands, without understanding how things work we wouldn't have reached the point that we are in. At the end of the day, we have biogas digesters, we have all these materials that we use. All of that is handmade, all of that is at least originally handmade. That would be a very interesting topic to look into and dive deeper into as much as we can. In this event, experts will discuss how shared spaces like maker spaces can help us create local solutions and learn from the local crafts that we already have in order to find innovative grassroots solutions that is built from within the community and poses solutions to the challenges of climate change that are facing different vulnerable communities and the vulnerable communities that we were just mentioning in our discussion today. Thank you all for your time, and it was a pleasure and an honor. Thank you, Ms. Ghada, Magali, Mahmoud, and Minna. Thank you all for your time, and goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, Marwan. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you
Bye.
so much. Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Bye.